Guys, let's talk about Dead City Episode 6. Bridge partners are hard to find. So this ended up, when I first started, I was thinking there wouldn't be as much symbolism in it as some other episodes, but that did not end up being the case. Not only is there quite a bit of symbolism, but it's nuts, the symbolism they did with the bear. So let's just get right into it. My pictures are going to be a little bit washed out today. I did get them this time, but I'm taking pictures from a screen, so they're a little bit, just a little bit washed out. But anyway, okay. So we start with, remember at the end of the last episode that Bruegel showed up at the boathouse and, that was after all of the foragers died and everything. So here he's taking Maggie and Armstrong and Hershel and Ginny to his museum. We see a Goya exhibit picture there. So we've still got the painting artistic theme going on. We do see a woman who is standing guard, and then she is knocked down and dragged into the bushes. We don't know by what. We find out later on, right? Then we switch to Negan and the Croat, standing near the Dama's corpse. And the Croat, of course, does not know that Negan is the one that killed the rat, but he's explaining what happened and how she died and everything. Negan asks what is next for him, and the Croat says that his family is arriving tomorrow and that they can stay or go, and that he will honor the fact that Negan held up his side of the bargain. Then we go to Maggie and Armstrong talking, and Hershel and Jenny in the museum. She just says that Bruegel is dangerous and in cahoots with the Croat. Maggie tells Armstrong that either way, they're going to head home since it's only them now, and he seems to accept that. But then, of course, Bruegel comes and gets them, or his people do, and bring him to the big long table that we saw before. He gives them wine, and it specifically shows Ginny drink this. So we're continuing this thing of Ginny having this injury that isn't doing so well. But he does say that they can leave if they want. He says he finds New Babylon inspiring, and he even says that he will get them the methane and kill the Croat and Negan, and he means the Dama too. Nobody else outside of Negan and the Croat realized that the Dama is dead yet. Um, anyway, he says that way everybody wins, and then he had this line that made me laugh where he said, well, not the people we're going to rob and kill, but, everybody else wins. And Armstrong says he'll think over what Bruegel has offered them, which of course Maggie is not happy about. Right after that, they bring in this guard who was, knocked down, and she's been pretty mangled, and then she dies. She can't talk to tell them what happened to her. I did notice that Bruegel calls the walkers skin sacks. I don't know if we've heard that before from him and I just missed it, but I always think it's interesting to hear what other people call them. So then we go to Negan and the Croat again, and the Croat is kind of having a freak out, and Negan tries to help him, but he doesn't really want help. The Croat just admits that it's his fault that the Dama died, and now with Negan leaving, he'll be alone. So that's really what he's freaking out about, is he doesn't really know what to do. He's been kind of a minion of the Dama for so long that he's not sure what to do with himself. And Negan says he can leave, he doesn't have to stay. Then Maggie and Armstrong are arguing again about the methane, and she says that he shouldn't trust Bruegel. And she then offers to help him get the methane, just her and Hershel and Ginny, and says the four of them can do it. And Armstrong is really confused and says he doesn't understand why suddenly she wants to save Negan. And she doesn't really offer in much of an explanation here, but it's obvious that she would rather them do it so that she can help Negan rather than, trusting Bruegel, which she's probably not wrong about. Bruegel is Bruegel is Bruegel, right? So then we have Negan and the Croat who are talking and smoking together. Okay, so one thing that I did notice, actually, let me go back here for a second. I noticed it actually in this scene. Armstrong, so I noticed a couple of little snippets that are parallels to Beth dialogue, but they're not exact, right? So in this scene, when Armstrong says, "Why do you suddenly want to save Negan?" he says, "I don't get it," and that just stuck out to me because Beth said, "I get it." In this case, it was, "I don't get it," so it was kind of a dialogue parallel, right? Then when we have the scene with the Croat and Negan, Negan asks him where he would go if he could really go anywhere, and he says, "I would go home to Croatia." And then he says, "No, I'm serious," at one point. So that was a serious mention. And I don't know, I feel like we haven't been pouncing on those quite as much in the last few years. Maybe we've just heard fewer of them. But back when the flagship show was on, anytime anyone said I'm serious, we saw it as a nod to this. Because so when they're saying I'm serious, it's, Serious, like I'm being serious. But it's a nod to the Sirius symbolism, which is Sirius, as in the Sirius dog star, right? So I heard that here, and it probably wouldn't have even jumped out at me quite as much if I hadn't just a couple of minutes ago heard them say, "I don't get it." So there were different nods to Beth dialogue in this episode. Um, Now, usually when we would see that, it's not that it has directly to do with Beth in the show. Obviously, she's not here in the show, but a lot of times it has to do just with the symbolism and that somebody else might be going away for a time and then returning. And I think that's kind of what they're doing here, because not too long after that, it's not in this scene, it's in the scene afterward. Negan tells the Croat to leave, and he does leave. Now, it looks from the previews for the trailer for the next episode that we're going to see him again pretty quickly. But so I don't know if this is going to end up being an extended symbolism for him, or if it's just a matter of him having to leave in the short term because Negan kicks him out. I mean, I don't know exactly. We'll have to see where it goes, but it was kind of interesting. Anyway, he wants Negan to go with him to Croatia, clean slate, all of that. But Negan says he can't. And then the Croat notices blood on the bottom of Negan's boot. And you can see him starting to put it together that maybe Negan was the one that stepped on the rat, right? So then in the next scene, he does ask about the rat and he figures it out, and they both run for the bat. And then we have this fight scene, which was actually a pretty cool fight scene, I thought. I had to wonder, someone will have to tell me, has Negan ever actually been hit by the Lucille bat before? It could be that we've seen him get hit by it, but I couldn't remember if he had. And if not, maybe it's kind of fitting that he gets hit by it at least once. In here, in the scene, he does get hit by it in the ribs, and you can tell he gets hurt, but it's not like some major injury or anything. Eventually, Negan is able to take the bat from the Croat and, starts yelling and saying, "I saved you from her. You should be thanking me. Tell me I'm wrong. Call me a liar." I wondered if the "call me a liar" might have been a nod to 408 when the governor took down the prison, like right before Hershel was killed. He said liar. And I know that we've heard that a few other times. It's not super prevalent, but they use it in particular instances. And I don't know that I even really have a theory about what it means, other than, the obvious meaning of the word liar. But I think they use it strategically sometimes. So it was kind of interesting to hear it in this scene. But the Croat does admit that it's true that Negan did make him who he is today. And then Negan tells him to go. And again, I kind of just can't help but feel bad for the Croat, even though he's not at all a moral guy. He he just isn't someone who's super independent, and he kind of doesn't know what to do with himself. So, he didn't really know what to do with himself after the Dama died, even though she really manipulated him and abused him. And then when Negan tells him to go and not come back, he starts saying, "No, please don't." Like he doesn't know what he's going to do with himself if he gets kicked out. But he does go. Um, so yeah, I thought it was actually a really interesting scene, and actually kind of a sad scene, but it was really fun to watch. So then we see Ginny go into the bathroom, and she's getting some water and trying to clean her wound. And then Maggie comes in. I really thought she was going to tell Maggie about it here, but she doesn't. Um, Maggie invites Ginny to come home with her and Hershel, and she sees the gun. I mean, Maggie's figured out that Ginny's trying to kill Negan. And so she kind of has a talk to her about it and says, "Do you know how many times I've tried to kill him or thought about killing him?" And I actually thought this was a really interesting moment of introspection for Maggie, because she says, you know, "I don't know why I haven't, other than maybe I'm afraid of what's on the other side, that it's not going to make it any better." And she said, "But what I do know is that it's cost me almost everything." She also says that she sees herself in Ginny a lot. So um, that's actually kind of interesting. I mean, it explains why there's a lot of tension between her and Ginny, because they're a lot alike. But it's also really interesting that Negan took on care of Ginny, of this girl who's a lot like Maggie. That's just really interesting, actually. And probably even he doesn't entirely realize that. But so yeah, anyway, that was pretty much that scene, but very interesting. Okay, then Negan finds Benjamin, the historian. And it's one of those things where I didn't even realize we haven't seen him for an episode or two. But he had been thrown into a cell to, he says, he thinks because it was a punishment for saying the thing about the Dama biting someone, like it embarrassed her, and so then she got mad at him and threw him in the cell. Now, remember that Benjamin has had major Beth parallels, okay? They were carting him around in the trunk of a car. He had a yellowish jacket on. I mean, all these things, right? Well, here we actually, I thought, got a little bit more of that. He asks him how long he was down there, and he doesn't know. He lost track of time. And then Negan says he's free to go. He can go home. And Benjamin says he doesn't have the first clue how he would get there. And then they drink alcohol together. Negan, again, this was kind of also a touching moment just with Negan talking about his past and how he used to manage the Saviors back when he was their leader, and how he knows now that they really needed to be saved from him. They were talking about how the winners tend to write history, and Benjamin actually said something very insightful. He said, it doesn't seem like if you're a winner, things are much better than if you're a loser. And what they mean by that is, maybe you win and have all the spoils and have all the physical rewards, right? The 3D rewards, but you tend to not feel very good about yourself, right? Because the winners tend to do kind of immoral things. And that's basically what Negan was saying, is he used to be a quote unquote winner in that he was the leader and thought he had it all figured out. But now he realizes that he was twisting and breaking his people by making them brutal like that. And he left them more broken than he found them. And then he just said, welcome to the winner's circle, kid. So I thought that was a really kind of a cool conversation. But anyway, back to the Beth parallels. So, I mean, just the fact that he's a prisoner, Benjamin, and he has been pretty much since the Dama got a hold of him. So for a while, it's got kind of a Grady feel to it, right? He's a prisoner, and the woman who's running the show, I think the Dama was much more brutal than Dawn, but still, it's a woman who was running the show, and clearly isn't the best, most moral leader out there. But even just in what he says, I'm seeing parallels. So, um, I mean, Negan's basically telling him to go home, which there's the home theme. And then he says he doesn't have the first clue how to get there. And I almost wonder if that's like a parallel to Beth not knowing where the group went after she was shot, Even him saying he doesn't know how long he was down there. Think about it this way. He disappeared into a black, dark cell. That could be a symbol of him dying, right? And then Negan finding him and bringing him out is almost like a resurrection symbol, like him waking up from something. So if this is like a parallel to Beth waking up after she was shot, stuff we haven't seen yet, then it's like, how long have you been here? I don't know, because she wouldn't know. And then you can go home. Well, I don't even know how I would get there because I don't know where my family went, right? I was just kind of seeing possible parallels there. So I thought this was really interesting. And then, of course, they do drink alcohol together. There it is. So I'm not even saying that Beth will necessarily drink alcohol when she wakes up. I mean, maybe, maybe not, but there's just alcohol in the situation, which is a callback to Still, right? Um, all right. So then we see uh everyone is asleep at first at the museum, and Hershel gets up and sneaks out. It took me I couldn't figure out what he was doing. I shouldn't even say it took me a minute. I didn't understand what he was doing until Maggie said it, and he dumped out the blood, but he went and cut one of the walkers, but he obviously wasn't trying to kill it because he cut it in the neck. And I didn't realize he had actually collected the blood in the bottle and he was going to go put water in it. So he was going to use that to poison somebody. We've seen this kind of thing before. But of course, Maggie wakes up and says, what are you doing? And then he pours it out and he tries to leave. And this is another part where we got some really good conversation here. She asks if he was going to the Dama, and he doesn't really say yes or no. But I think what happened here is I think he was doing better. He was done with the Dama. He was more, pro Maggie and all of that. But when she said she wanted to have them all help Armstrong get the methane, and, it's because she wanted to help Negan, I think that soured Hershel on her again, because it's just looping back again, and he's sick of her being obsessed over Negan, and so I think that angered him, and that made him decide to get up in the middle of the night and leave. But they have a really good talk where he talks about how, going home isn't really home. It's just, oh, let's see, what did he say? I wrote it down here. It's just pretending everything is okay, but Maggie isn't really there. She's not really present. So, I think Hershel is doing a good job, in various episodes, opening up to Maggie and telling her how he really feels. And Maggie, I don't think she entirely knows what to do with it, but at least he's being honest, about things, and he's not just clamming up on her anymore. So that's good. And then he tried to leave, but of course, there's the bear. Now, here's the thing about the bear. I would have harped on the bear symbolism either way because we've seen bear symbolism around Beth before. It mostly has to do with the constellations, right? The Great Bear is the constellation that. So the Great Bear, Ursa Major, is a constellation famous for the Big Dipper. So neither the North Star nor the Sirius star is in this constellation, but the Dipper is something that we've always kind of associated with the spoon, with Beth's spoon. And we have seen this symbolism for the bear and the bear star and the bear constellation entangled with Beth's symbolism a lot. Okay. So, a lot of times we even see like stuffed bears and we see just all kinds of things. So the fact that they're doing a bear in this, which is, it's clearly all CGI. It's not something that you would normally expect to see. I mean, it's very purposeful, right? It's very intentional. But it gets crazier. So like I said, I would have harped on that either way because this is symbolism that we've seen entangled with Beth symbolism a lot. But then it goes out of its way to show that this bear is missing an eye, okay? Which is a clear, Sirius thing to only have one eye. It's like a combination of the Sirius and the bear symbolism. So it's missing an eye. I also noticed it was missing an ear. It didn't focus on that, but the ear directly above the eye that's missing has been torn off. This bear is pretty mangled. It's been in a lot of fights. And it does seem to be, I don't know, it may just be hungry. That could be the case, but it also may be rabid. It may be very sick. Maybe too many walkers have gotten to it or something. I don't know. Anyway, so this sequence was fun. I will say too, one other thing I noticed is I was thinking that it wasn't terribly realistic that the bear got in, because we just didn't see it get in, right? It was pounding on the door, but that was a pretty heavy metal door. Yes, it was denting it, but if the first time the bear rammed it, all it did was dent it inward, I don't know that the bear is going to be able to get in through that door. And then all of a sudden it was in there with Maggie. And I was going, okay, how did it get in? I mean, bears do not have opposable thumbs. It didn't like open the door, right? But then it occurred to me that this could be actually symbolic. So whether it's realistic or not that the bear got in is not the point. We noticed, I think it was during the Leah arc that we noticed and really started to focus on. I don't know, I think we noticed it before that, but we really homed in on it. This theme about not coming in through the front door. So like when Daryl first went into Leah's home, he was going in through the back door. And sometimes it's a back door and sometimes it's a side door, but it's like they don't exit through the front door, or they don't exit the way they entered, that sort of thing. And we see it a lot. We see it around Beth. I know that we've seen it around Rick and Michonne. Even if you go back to season 4 with the Claimers and Rick, when the Claimers came into the house he was sleeping in, when Michonne and Carl were gone looking for supplies, he didn't go out the front door. He went out the window, right? And it's just this theme about having to go out a different way. And it's usually, it has to do with survival, right? But then they do entering a different way. Anyway, we just noticed this theme. And like I said, we kind of really homed in on it with the Leah arc, but we knew that we'd seen it plenty of other times. And so I wonder if this might be some play on that. Like it didn't come in through that door. It came in through a different door. It had a different way of getting in. And they don't know what that was. It just suddenly got in somehow. I don't know. It's probably got a meaning. I think this whole thing was very, very intentional. So if they wanted to show us how the bear got in, they would have. The fact that they didn't, there's probably some greater meaning behind that. I don't pretend to know exactly what it is. Keep in mind, Beth went out the window too, in still. And again, this is slightly different because this is coming in, not going out, but I think it's all part of the same symbolism. Okay, and so this bear chases Maggie around and it's all creepy and everything. But then it gets actually a little bit crazier with the symbolism. Right when it looks like the bear is going to get Maggie, Hershel throws a knife and hits it. And I managed to capture this picture perfectly. Look at this thing, guys. At first, when he hit it with the knife, I thought he got it in the eye again, and it was showing him. I mean, the eye's already gone, but I thought he hit it in the eye. But he didn't. As you can see in this picture, he hit it above the eye. Okay, so you can see where the eye socket is, and the eye is gone, and the knife is directly above that. You guys understanding? He hit this thing in the left side of its forehead, directly above the eye. He threw a knife into this bear in the exact place that Beth was shot. There is no freaking way that is a coincidence. First, we have the Sirius. Well, okay, let's go back through everything I've said. First, we had the I get it. In this case, it was I don't get it. Then we had the Sirius dialogue, and the Croat was kind of banished. Then we have the bear. On top of that, we have a one-eyed bear, which is Sirius symbolism. And on top of that, we're hitting it with the knife in the forehead in the same place where Beth was shot. Um, hello. No way that's accidental, right? So yeah, the symbolism here was actually kind of nuts that they went so granular with it, right? Um, all right, so then with Hershel's help, the bear does eventually die. It kind of impales itself on the gate. And then Hershel takes off. He doesn't wait around. So then Maggie goes looking for him and finds Negan. Once again, I just thought this episode was really kind of touching. You get this interpersonal stuff going on between the characters, these um, conversations. And, uh, he tells her Hershel isn't there. He tells her the Dama is dead. He actually gives her a place to check. He says, check King Francis Theater. He might be there if he thinks she's still alive, the Dama. She does tell him about Bruegel's plans, that Bruegel's coming for him, and he asks about Ginny. But you can tell Negan's very conflicted right now. His family's coming, and, he thought that this was going to be a big mess, that, the Dama was going to be controlling him, and clearly she would have blackmailed him with the safety of his family or something like that. But that's not the case anymore. I mean, he's kind of in charge, and, he doesn't have to keep his family there anymore. And you can tell that he wants to see them. But he at the same time, he feels guilty. He says he's ruined their life so many times, and how can I promise her, meaning probably his wife, that it's not going to happen again? But then he realizes that, given that he killed Maggie's husband, that she's probably not the person to be asking this question, so he apologizes. And then he says, did the old times, the good times, happen that way, or is it easier for us to remember them wrong? And I think this is also kind of part of a theme that they've been doing throughout this whole season about um, whether they remember the old times correctly or not. We had Maggie and Armstrong reminiscing about their favorite foods, and we have Hershel saying he doesn't really want to go back to the old world. He likes the world as it is, and he wants to move forward with how things are rather than trying to resurrect the past. And you could even see it actually as another part of the theme we saw in Still with Beth and Daryl about just letting the past go and moving forward from where you are, because you can't change the past. You're not going to actually be able to bring back the old world, but you can take what you have and try to move forward in a positive way. I mean, that's basically what Beth and Daryl were doing. And I feel like that's the same theme they're working with here, but of course it's slightly different. There's different takes on it, and it's tailored to Maggie and Negan's story here. But this was just it was a good conversation. And I felt like Jeffrey Dean Morgan did a really good job here. Sure enough, the next day his family arrives, and he tells, his people to tell them to turn around and go back and take Annie and Joshua back to Tennessee, where they came from, to take them home. Now, we don't really see what's going to happen with this. I don't know. Annie always struck me as a very, good head on her shoulders and no nonsense kind of woman. So I feel like she's not going to want to go until she speaks to him. Even if she doesn't stay, even if she does go ultimately, I think she's going to kind of be like, excuse me, sir, you brought me all this way. You're going to talk to me before I leave again. At least that's what I'm kind of thinking or hoping she'll do. But we don't see any of that here. We just see him tell them to send her home. So then we have this, we always seem to end on kind of a twisted Bruegel scene where they play bridge. Now, this is kind of interesting because when I saw the title and that there was bridge in the title, I, as most people probably did, assumed it meant something about an actual bridge, as in, something that spans a river or a road, like a bridge, infrastructure wise. But it's actually talking about the game bridge. Now, I do think that this is a play on the word and a play on the symbolism. There's a lot of bridge symbolism that they use. We've seen it definitely around Beth. We've seen it around other people too. And something about falling off the bridge and surviving, or being under the bridge a lot of times has kind of a death and burial aspect to it. It's really interesting symbolism that we've seen for a long time. So I think that they just decided to use the game bridge as a way to kind of have a play on the word, but it's still the same symbolism. And then there's the fact that we're using cards here, like poker cards, and there's symbolism in there too, right? So I gotta admit, I'm not terribly familiar with the game bridge. It's not one that I play. So I looked it up, um, and I'm not going to say a whole lot about it. I was kind of reading how you do it, and I'm sure we could find a lot more symbolism if we decided to uh, research it a little bit more. But the thing that jumps out at me most is that it's a trick-taking card game. So it is a game where you have different sides, partners that are working together, and they call it taking tricks or taking cards. I mean, it's almost like you could almost say it's like a chess game with cards, and I don't mean that it's very much like chess. I just mean it's a game of strategy and trying to win against the other people. So, like I said, I'm sure we could find a lot of symbolism in this, when it comes to Beth, and TD symbolism. If we really researched it a lot, there is a French connection. It came from Italy and France, different things like that. But overall, I think that this, at least in this moment, is really more about Bruegel. Um, because he says here that it's not really about winning. He just likes playing the game. He's like a true politician and he's just having fun, right? And so he just likes the game of strategy and he wants to win. And I mean, don't get me wrong, even saying that winning is not everything, he totally wants to win. And I think Maggie's 100% right that this is not a man to be trusted, right? Armstrong, I think he can feel that. Armstrong's not an idiot, but he does want to get the methane for New Babylon, so he's kind of struggling with himself. Um, let's see. So Bruegel asks if Maggie told Armstrong not to trust him. He said she did, and the answer is no. Oh, but then he plays, let's see, do I have this here? Yeah, he plays this interesting hand, and this is one that I had to kind of look up how you play bridge to figure out what this meant. And again, I'm sure there's a lot more symbolism here. It would have jumped out at me a lot more if this had been the Queen of Diamonds, because we believe Beth is the Queen of Diamonds. Um, the Queen of Hearts is a little bit different, but I'm sure there's a lot of symbolism here, right? But the basic thing is that Bruegel wins this hand, theoretically. So the idea is that in bridge, I'm going to try and explain this even though I'm not much of a bridge player. The first card down is the suit that everyone is supposed to play. But of course, there's going to be some people that don't have a spade card, right? So generally, whoever plays the highest card in that suit wins. So because Bruegel played the spade is the highest card, then it goes king, queen, jack, and then of course the numbers go down, right? So in the game of bridge, an ace is higher than a king. And so Bruegel wins this round. There is something called a trump suit, which is like an extra rule, and there might be a suit that trumps any of them that are put down. So like if the heart suit was a trump suit, then actually the person to Bruegel's right would have won because in that particular hand, hearts trump spades, right? So there's just kind of different rules that you have to figure out. But in this case, it looks like Bruegel won because the spade was put down and he put down the highest spade and they didn't say anything about a trump suit. So, I mean, I'm not entirely sure what that means. Certainly, he thinks he's going to win, and it kind of suggests he's going to win. But I also wonder if, like, for example, Maggie is the Queen of Hearts. Maybe there's a trump suit that he's not aware of, and so Maggie will win. I mean, I'm really not thinking that they're going to kill Maggie off and Bruegel will be the new head of the show, right? So, um, anyway, this is just kind of interesting, and we'll have to see how it goes. But I was also thinking that we could tie that into Beth symbolism if that ends up being the case, because it's like the basic rule is that the suit that gets put down, spades, would be the highest card wins. But what if there's a trump suit that he doesn't know about? And we kind of talk about Beth that way. Like there's something that she represents somebody who lived that they don't know about. She represents like a secret weapon that is kind of hidden right now. So anyway, that might be me reaching a little bit deep into the symbolism, but I think this is interesting, and we'll have to keep an eye on how it plays out, because if that ends up being the case, then I do think that we could tie it that way into Beth. If it's not, and I'm kind of reaching, then not so much. So we'll just have to see how it goes moving forward. But really interesting with the bridge symbolism and the cards and the queen and the Trump suite. I mean, it's just going to be interesting to see how it plays out. What else do we have in this scene? Let's see. Bruegel does know all about how Armstrong was supposed to kill Negan, and that's because he found Narvaez before she died. Um, and she told him. And then he tells Armstrong, the thing about Armstrong, he's a good guy, and I actually do like him a lot, but he is very easily swayed by people, and he just needs to take a stronger stand on things. So Bruegel tells him that he, meaning Bruegel, is going to get the methane either way. So Armstrong can either, help him, partner with him, or fold, but either way, he's going to be playing the game. And then that's kind of the end that we see of this, but I'm kind of thinking that Armstrong is going to agree to help Bruegel. Bruegel is manipulating him into helping him. And I think Armstrong's going to do it because he always does. And that's unfortunate because it's probably not going to go well. And I hope Armstrong doesn't get killed in the process, but he might. Um, so yeah, that was kind of the end of that. And then the only other scene we see is Ginny showing up at the church to kill Negan. Again, I thought this was actually really touching. I thought it was really sad because basically Negan starts to cry. I mean, I think he knows exactly why she's there. I think he was shocked to see her. Maggie did not tell him at any point that Ginny was with them. I think he still thought she was back at the bricks where they live. But so he was shocked to see her, but then when she held the gun on him, I think he knew exactly why, because he told her he killed her dad. Um, so he starts to cry, and then Ginny actually starts to cry, like we see her chin tremble, and then she passes out. So then he takes her back inside, and he does see her wound, and it's clearly infected at various points throughout this episode. If you look close, you can see that she's sweating, she's perspiring. So obviously this wound has gotten infected. And so he takes her inside to take care of her. And that is pretty much the episode. So yeah, I actually really liked this episode. I thought it was interesting. I thought it was, again, a lot of the conversations, the interpersonal things going on were really well done and really good. And then there's just that crazy bear symbolism with the one eye and the wound in the forehead. I mean, what are the odds? But what do we know? We're all crazy, right? We're all delusional. Anyway, that is what I have to say for now about this episode. I did enjoy it. I hope you guys enjoyed it too. And I will be back later in the week with more Ask videos. Okay? Talk to you soon.